So when's the last time you called a friend of yours Satan? And is it okay to do so? Do you know that Jesus did just that? And there's a reason you should have somebody in your life who can do the same to you. I'll explain. And also stuff Christians say the Bible says that it doesn't actually say on today's Pastor Paul's Bible Talk and Tube, just for you, right here on the Pastor Paul YouTube channel. All right, guys, welcome. Here's my first time at recording the Bible Talk. I usually do it live, but I've been thinking about a couple of reasons that I needed to change that. One is because I do need a day where I'm not on Zoom. And so every day I'm doing meetings, I do coaching, I'm on Zoom. And then Sundays, we have our Sunday gathering on Zoom. And so Saturday mornings also. It was just getting to be a little bit much. So I'm going to record these during the week and play them on Saturday and have them for you available on Saturday morning. And we'll do Q&As live from time to time. And we certainly do those with our subscription Patreon community. But this is the time that we actually dive into the Bible. I do a lot of commentary about culture, about Christianity, religion, all the craziness there. But one of the things I really love to do is to take the Bible from the culture it was written in and make it pertinent to what we do today. Not just what the Bible says, but what it actually means for you and me today. And I'm going to start today in just a little bit. I'll tell you why Psalm 139 is not a verse that condemns abortion and demands we all vote Republican. That's coming up down in the Bible Talk. But I'm going to start with this idea. Do you have anybody in your life who can turn to you and call you Satan and it be a good moment in your life? Now, I'm not sure any of us want to be called Satan. I can almost hear the church lady from the old Saturday Night Live skits in my mind. Could it be Satan? But no, none of us want to be called Satan. But I'm going to tell you why you need somebody in your life who can fulfill that role. Maybe not call you Satan, but I'll tell you what the purpose of what happened in the Bible and why it's pertinent for today, and particularly for some of you out there who I know have lost your church community. Now, I think the church has done accountability horribly, tragically wrong for my entire lifetime. It really isn't accountability. It's really like, let me condemn you on an ongoing basis and let me put shame on you. And maybe if you get shamed enough, you'll start being better. When I think the Bible tells us quite the opposite, that shame is where sin thrives, not where it gets resolved. But I'm going to talk about this guy, Peter, and everybody who has been in church for a long time seems to love Peter because Peter is an external processor like me. My wife says everything that hits my brain comes out of my mouth because I'm an external processor. And sometimes I'm saying things that she's just like, oh my God, I can't believe you're saying this stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm just processing. I'm just processing. And she's like, well, for those of us that are internal processors, what comes out of your mouth is very painful sometimes. And it was the same, I think, for Jesus, having Peter around, one of his 12 inner circle disciple guys. Peter always was sticking his foot in his mouth as whatever hit his brain came out his mouth. And Jesus had an interesting relationship with Peter because he was definitely willing to tell Peter what he thought of him. And some of us, when we've lost that shame-based accountability in the church community, we lost something that we needed to lose, but also we lost something that's good. And that's having somebody in our lives who's willing to say, hey, you know what? What you're doing right now is not your best moment, or what you're doing right now is not the best you can be. And let's figure out why and let's fix it. Do you have one of those in your life? And sometimes when we lose our church community, we lose people around us who are willing to say, whoa, 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 whoa. This may not be the best thing for you that you're doing right now. So let me tell you where I see this in the Bible and kind of talk about how that can work. And so I hope you're hanging with me, and we'll enjoy this as we talk in Bible Talk today. And we start in the book of Matthew, chapter 16. And so I'm going to read a little bit of Bible, and then we'll stop and talk about it. And the Pharisees and Sadducees came. Now, remember, the Pharisees and Sadducees were the religious leaders. They were the good people of the day. They were the pastors, the Little League coaches, the Boy Scout leaders, the people that you would say the pillars of the community. And Jesus didn't like those guys at all. Not because he doesn't like pillars of the community, but he doesn't like self-righteous ones that want to like act holy, put laws on other people, and then but not walk out the best of their heart and not care about people. And so the Pharisees and the Sadducees, whenever we see them come up in the Bible, you can hear like the evil villain music come up in the background, that here comes the religious people. Now, that doesn't mean that God doesn't like the religion of the Jewish people. It means, like with Christianity, God doesn't like it when any religion becomes extremely law-based and oppressive to people, rather than helping them see that they're good in the eyes of God and thus can be good in the eyes of everyone. So the Pharisees and Sadducees came, and to test him, Jesus, they asked Jesus to show them a sign from heaven. And he answered, when it's evening, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, it will be stormy, for the sky is red and threatening. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. I love this passage because he's saying to the religious leaders, big whoop. You can look around you and tell what's happening, but you don't actually know what God is doing in the season. And I think if Jesus was in the flesh on earth today, he would point at evangelicals in the American community and say the same thing. You guys are so good at looking around you and saying that person's evil and that person is this. And we hate Lil Nas X for his Satan shoes, and we hate Cardi B for dressing scantily. And he would say, you can look around and see all those things, but you don't actually know God's heart in the season. So I'm not impressed with your religion. And that's exactly what he was saying to the Pharisees and Sadducees here. And so that leads to sort of this discussion with his disciples. And he says, hey, I talk that way to them because they don't have eyes to see and ears to hear anymore. But you guys, you get to see cool stuff that the prophets of old always wanted to see. So when we go to Matthew 16, verse 13, he has this really interesting conversation. And it says in verse 13, now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do the people say that the Son of Man is? And they say, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. And Jesus said to them, but who do you say that I am? I love that he took it like, let's get it out of theological abstracts and let's get to, what does it mean to you? What does this all mean to you? And Simon Peter replied, you are the Christ, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. It was not a small thing, Peter said, and I'll tell you more about that. One of the things I want to do is take the Bible off the page for you and make it real and make it mean something and let you see in 3 dimensions what was actually happening there. So note that verse 16, when Peter said, you are the Messiah, it was not a small thing. It shouldn't be. It should be like in big print with 3 exclamation points at the end of it. Verse 17, Jesus answered him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades or hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Then he strictly charged the disciples to tell no one that he was the Christ. So I'm going to keep reading on in Matthew 16 to get to our part about Satan. But I think it's important to stop and look at what's happening here. So he's had this encounter with the religious guys, and he says, I'm really not impressed with your religion. You're just really good at condemning people. But the truth is, you don't know God, and I'm not impressed. So, and he says, you don't know what's happening in the season. And so then he talks to his disciples, and it's really interesting that they go to this place called Caesarea Philippi, and it was known to be the center of demonic worship. it was considered the worst place on earth by many. It was supposedly had an open portal where you could, where demons could go to hell and back right there in Caesarea Philippi. And it's interesting that this story was set with that backdrop. Now, some have said this was Jesus like walking into Satan's lair and planting his flag and saying, see, I'm going to win. But I really think it's more that Jesus was saying, let's go to the worst place around. And let me show you that I'm not afraid to go into the messiness of humanity. When people are like little Nas X and Satan's shoes, I think Jesus would say, cool, let's go right in the center of that. And let me show you how much I love people that even when they think they're proclaiming against the Spirit of God, something of beauty and God is there. And so Jesus goes right into the middle of this place and he says this thing, who do people say the Son of Man is? And Jesus would often call himself the Son of Man. It was, it ultimately means, who are they saying this human guy is? He was declaring himself to be born of a human being. And then he says, who do people say that I am? And they're like, hey, John the Baptist, Elijah, like you're just another one of the prophets is what a lot of people are saying. And he says, okay, you guys have been closer with me for a while. Who do you say? And here's Peter, our verbal processor. He just jumps out there. You're the Christ, the Son of the living God. Now, for 2,000 years, the Jewish people had been saying, here comes the Messiah. They would leave an empty chair for Elijah and just be waiting for something to happen. 2,000 years, 400 years between the end of the Old Testament and the start of the New Testament. The Jewish people had been believing now, maybe this is the time. Maybe today is when the Messiah appears and everything changes. So here's Peter, Simon Peter. His name was Simon, and then Jesus here called him the Rock, Peter, which means rock. He says, you're the Rock, Simon. So I'm going to call you Rock from now on, like Dwayne Johnson became the Rock for a while. He says, Simon Peter. Wow. What you just said is unbelievable. And I think Peter was like, you're the Christ. And then was like, oh, crud, what did I just say? I've been waiting my whole life to see the Messiah appear. Yet here I am. What am I doing speaking this out loud? And there he was. And Jesus turns to him and says, dude, that was awesome. That was awesome. And he says, because you know what? That didn't come from inside you, Peter. That came with your spirit commingling with heaven. And you pulled some wisdom from someplace supernatural. And when you were verbally processing, that came out of your mouth. And that was awesome. Peter was this boorish, brash, shoot from the hip, everything coming out of the mouth guy, sticking his foot in his mouth. And here's Jesus saying, Peter, you're amazing. And you know what? I'm going to start my church, and it's going to be built on what you just said in this most satanic and dark and evil of places. That's what we're going to build the church around. This is awesome. And Peter had to be going, what? What did I do? Or he may have been saying, holy crap, I can't believe my whole life I've been expecting to see the Messiah, and I just declared this guy is him. Wow. Can you imagine how that had to feel to think, am I really standing with the guy that we've been waiting 2,000 years for him to appear? Not only am I standing with him, I'm one of his disciples. I am in, brother. Because he's going to take over the government, put us in charge, and I'm going to be right there as one of the main men. This is amazing. Do you have somebody in your life that says, dude, what you just did was awesome. You're an incredible person. This is a gift to be able to say to somebody, you're amazing. I had a coaching session in the coaching work I do with somebody this morning, and he was telling me all the reasons that he had been a bad husband recently to his wife. And now the evangelical mindset would be to say, yes, those are horrible things. Let's pray for forgiveness. And maybe God won't strike you with lightning. And maybe you can just get by because you're terrible, horrible dirt. God, I hate that theology. So my friend was telling me all the things he had done wrong as a husband. Sorry, my computer keeps beeping on me. I said, you know what? I know your wife. I've talked to her about you on numerous occasions. She thinks you're an amazing husband. She thinks you're an amazing husband. And that's the truth of who you are. Yes, now you did this, and that wasn't your best moment as an amazing husband. So let's figure out why you did that, because that is not a part of who you are. You're an amazing husband. And if you do something selfish in your marriage, that's coming from some place that you're trying to take care and make your own safety and value rather than being self-sacrificial to your wife so that she can be self-sacrificial to you and you guys find your safety and value in each other. And he was like, so what I just told you made you tell me I'm an amazing husband? I'm like, yeah. Because that's who you are. And that's what Jesus was telling Peter here. You're amazing, Peter. And what you just spoke out, is going to be the cornerstone of me building my church. Now, our Catholic friends think this statement meant that Peter was the first pope. I don't agree with that, but I'm not going to fight over it. I don't think he was saying, Peter, upon you, the rock, I'm going to build the church. I think he was saying, upon the cornerstone of your confession and declaration of me as the fulfillment of Scripture and of the law, that is what the church is going to be built upon. Does that make sense? And he's saying, what you said is what we're going to build the church upon from here going. And interesting, then he said, don't tell anybody I'm the Messiah. We don't want that getting around. And I think I'm not going to delve into that today, but that would be something interesting to look at. I want to bring something up here like I'm supposed to do while we're doing all of this, just to have you know that I do coaching. And if you'd like to join my coaching cohort coming up this month, you can jump in. And so I'll leave that information up for a little bit. So now let's keep going in Matthew 16. So we've just seen this amazing thing that Jesus tells Peter, you are incredible. My man, I can't believe how awesome that was. And then the tone of it all changes just a little bit. Matthew 16, verse 21. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter, here's my man Peter, Peter took him aside and began to rebuke Jesus. So the rabbi that Jesus is following, and remember, to follow a rabbi was such a privilege to these young Jewish men. To take him aside and start to rebuke him was really out of line in their relationship. But Peter takes him aside and begins to rebuke him, saying, far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you. Now, Peter's saying a good thing. Peter is like, I'm going to protect you, Jesus. I'm not going to let you die. So let's stop saying those things because it's not a very good marketing tool for our cause. And Jesus turns to him and says, Peter, there you go with that mouth again. Just a few minutes ago, he's saying, Peter, your mouth just heard something from heaven and spoke it out. And that's so amazing. What you just declared is where I'm going to build my church. And now he turns to him and says this, get behind me, Satan. That's a pretty harsh rebuke, isn't it? Get behind me, Satan. Ouch. We all need somebody in our life who will be our champion that says, I know you're telling me you've done things wrong, but I want you to know you're amazing. And now here's Jesus, who just did that for Peter, saying, Peter, because I told you you're amazing, I'm exactly the guy to sit here and tell you right now, this is not your best moment. But he, Jesus, turned to Peter in verse 23, if you're following along in your Bible, said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance. Ooh, that hurts. If you're using the ESV, like me, you have a little footnote there that says, you are a stumbling block. So get the contrast here. Just a few minutes ago, Jesus was saying, you're the rock on which I'm going to build my church, or that statement that you just said is the rock on which I'm going to build my church. And now he's saying, Peter, you're the rock that's going to trip me up. And it's not okay. You're the rock on which we're going to build the church. Now you're the stumbling block. That's a problem. Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance, a stumbling block to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. Jesus said to Peter, you're amazing. What just came out of your mouth is so awesome because it came from heaven. Your spirit mingled with supernatural wisdom and you spoke it out, and that's incredible. And now you're speaking from the things of man. Your mind is now not set on the things of the supernatural heaven, but of the things of this earth. So Jesus said, Peter, look at the contrast between you and those Pharisees. They can't see what God is saying and doing in the season at the beginning of the chapter. And you have. And now here he is saying, Peter, gosh darn it. Just a second ago, you were speaking from heaven and it was incredible. And I told you were the best thing since sliced bread. Now you're speaking from the same spirit that those religious guys speak from. And it needs to stop right the hell now. Pharisees, you can look at the sky and know the weather, but you can't see beyond that sky into the supernatural to know what God is doing in this season. Peter, you saw beyond the sky and you brought that down to earth and you spoke it out. And it's something on which we're going to build this thing called Christianity, which has kind of become a bad word, but that's what we're going to build this new movement on. Is you hearing from heaven, where the Pharisees, the religious guys, the law keepers, the evangelical fundamentalists, they can't see up there anymore because they're only looking at the things of man, of humanity, of the world. They're not letting their spirit be mingled with something supernatural. And you're doing something amazing here. And now just a few minutes later, a few verses later, we don't know exactly what the time elapse here was, but a few verses later, he says, Peter, gosh darn it. Now you're talking from what's right in front of you, just like those Pharisees and Sadducees, just like those fundamentalists, just like those evangelicals, and it's got to stop because it's a stumbling block to my mission. My mission, Jesus said, when quoting Isaiah, is to set captives free, and now you're trying to put people in bondage by stopping my mission to go to Jerusalem and be crucified. And I think there's a little bit of personal stuff here too of Jesus saying, Peter, this is hard enough already. We know from Gethsemane that Jesus was agonizing over what he was going towards. And he's saying, Peter, gosh, this is hard enough. It's hard enough with those guys that are up on the stage all the time. The Pharisees, the Sadducees, the evangelicals telling me that I'm not what I think I am. And now here's one of my own telling me the same. You got to get behind me, Satan, and stop saying that stuff. And he wasn't calling Peter the devil. He was saying, you're now speaking not from heaven, but from something of earth. And in the Jewish tradition, they believed heaven was the realm of God, earth was the realm of Satan. And here they are in Caesarea Philippi saying, now you're speaking from this place rather than heaven, Peter. Now, what's important here is to know that Peter had somebody in his life that would say, Peter, you're amazing. I know you're not perfect, but let me tell you your true identity of how awesome you are. And then, so he's the guy that's able to turn around and say, Peter, remember when I told you you're awesome? What you're doing right now isn't coming out of that awesomeness of you. It's coming out of a place that's not your best. And let's figure out why and let's fix it. I have a Christian troll on my TikTok page who's always saying, coaching's not in the Bible. Paul, you do coaching. That's not in the Bible. Bleep that. This is discipleship, and discipleship is coaching. Jesus is coaching Peter up here. Go after that. Remember what that was like to speak from heaven and speak it out, Peter. And remember now what it feels like to speak from man. So in the future, which he doesn't say here, but he would tell him later, when you're in charge of all of this, I'm going to need you to be speaking from heaven, not from humankind, not from this space of speaking out of what you know. Why are our Christian friends all enraptured with QAnon these days? Because they're not hearing from heaven anymore. They're speaking from what they see in the sky. They can predict the weather from kooky internet sites rather than reaching up and pulling something amazing from heaven down to earth. And Jesus is coaching Peter up. Remember what it felt like to do it the right way, and remember what it feels like to do it the wrong way. So in the future, you can figure it out yourself. But me, the guy that called you that amazing person, I'm the one who can tell you you're not having your best moment. And for those of you listening to my voice today and say, Paul, you're pastoring me through your social media work and through TikTok and such, then let me encourage you. You need somebody in your life saying you are the most amazing thing since sliced bread. And that is the person you let say, hey, this is not your best moment right now. Let's fix this. Let me coach you through this. That troll on TikTok, that person at your church that wants to sidle up to you and tell you you need to fix this, this, and this, forget their advice. All advice is not good advice. Good advice comes from the person that's going to tell you you are the greatest thing since sliced bread, and then is willing to honestly tell you, you know what, right now what you're doing is not good. We got to figure this out, because it seems to me what you're doing is not drawing you closer to heaven and being able to hear that supernatural voice, but it seems to be driving you a little bit away from it. Jesus was that guy, that coach, that guy making Jesus a disciple that could say to him, you're awesome and you're not awesome. This is good. This is not. Do this, Peter. Don't do that. And unfortunately, on the night of crucifixion, Peter started listening to another voice in his head, started getting intimidated by the voices here on earth around him. And he spoke out of his humanity rather than out of his connection to divinity and to the universe. Here's the really cool thing, though, about Jesus calling Peter Satan. Matthew 17, verse 1. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. Jesus called Peter Satan, and it doesn't disqualify Peter from not only being one of Jesus' disciples and followers, but from being one of those inner circle followers. If you have a champion who's willing to be honest with you when you don't have your best day, that champion turning to you and saying, stop it, stop that right now, what you're doing. And James and John are also in that inner circle. And there was a time when Jesus rebuked them and said, you don't know the spirit you're of right now. So Jesus, 3 inner circle guys get rebuked by Jesus at different times of him saying, what you're doing is not from heaven right now. It's from another spirit, another mindset that needs to be fixed. And that's the problem with the evangelical church today, is we don't listen to anybody that says, you know, that mindset, that Republican right-wing mindset, it's really bad. And it's really damaging you. It's damaging the families in the church. It's damaging culture. And by God, it's damaging the message of the Bible. And the second you say that, I have some troll come on my page and say, false teacher, because we don't have voices that are allowed to speak in and say, stop it, correct that right now. And I don't even care to be one of those voices anymore, because I don't think the evangelical church is going to change in my lifetime. I think it's going to become insignificant. How about you? Particularly if you're in a time of deconstruction and reconstruction of your faith, and you may not have a church community around you, particularly in COVID, who do you have that can speak that honesty in you? And I would say one thing as a pastor, I wouldn't recommend that person be a family member, at least not an immediate family member. A, because they're in the same forest you are, and they may not see the forest for the trees any more than you do in your life. And B, you just don't want your wife or your father or your mother or somebody to be the ones to carry that burden. So who's in your life telling you you're the best thing ever? And because they believe in you so strongly, they'd be willing to be honest and say, "Eesh, this is not good." But then after telling you this is not good, they would still say, "Come with me. I'm going to go do something really important today, and I want you to be a part of it." Do you have that person in your life? And are you willing to be that person for somebody else? Because what's given to us, we then have to pour out to others. And later, at the end of the earthly interaction of Peter and Jesus, Jesus tells him, "Take care of my sheep. You're going to be the guy." So Peter learned from Jesus, and that he became the mentor to others. So if you're not in a church right now, make sure to find somebody who believes in you, who will be really honest and say, "What you did there was not good. Let's fix that. And let's keep walking forward together." I hope that's a helpful word for you. I just really felt that was a word for some folks this week, and I hope it does make a difference for you. I'm going to take a quick break to give my voice just a couple minutes rest. And then I'm going to talk about why Psalm 139 is not a verse saying you must vote Republican, even though some believe that it is. So I hope you'll stick around for that here on Pastor Paul's Bible Talk and Tube. Okay. Oh, shoot, I was going to hit this thing just right. Amen. All right, guys. My music was a little shorter than I thought it was going to be there. Sorry about that. So up on the screen now, you see my support Pastor Paul options. I don't pass the plate and do tithes, but I do allow people to give into the work that I do. And here's a couple of ways you can do it. I have my Venmo subscription up there. If you point your camera phone at that QR code there, it'll take you right to Venmo on your phone and tell you how you can give through Venmo. Or you can just go to Venmo and go to @Paul-Swearingen-1 and give that way. Now, you see at the bottom of the screen there, this is not a tax deductible gift. My company is a for-profit company, so you're not going to be able to get a tax deduction for it, but I still believe that God blesses generosity wherever we are generous. So if you'd like to give a one-time gift, that's the way to do it. Just point your camera at that Venmo and give to me through Venmo. And no secrets here. That money goes to feed hungry children, my kids. That is my for-profit business. That's how I make a living, as well as doing the coaching work that I do. Also, if you want to give on an ongoing basis, then I do that through subscription. You see the second QR code there. It says Patreon, where you can go to my website, patreon.com/NPE podcast. And you can subscribe and get some cool stuff, including my audiobook. I did a podcast this week with Bob Prater, and we did a short part that's available to the public, and then a longer part that's available just to the Patreon subscribers. And so if you would like to give on a monthly basis, you can subscribe and just point it at that Patreon thing, or go to patreon.com/NPE podcast. You'll get access to my novel in audiobook form. And you'll also get access to my private Facebook group and some other cool stuff. In fact, we just gave away our quarterly prizes the other day, including giving away like one of these coffee mugs and some other cool NPE swag. And we've got a lot of other cool stuff coming. So I hope you'll come. So either if you want to give a one-time gift, point your phone at that Venmo. If you're listening to this through the podcast, you can go to Venmo and give at Paul-Swearingen-1. Has my picture there. You'll be able to find it. Or you can go subscribe and give monthly through my Patreon page at patreon.com/NPE podcast. And I will be forever grateful for you. All right. I clicked out of my music, so I don't have it here for me now. Wait, maybe I do. No, I don't. So Psalm 139, is it a verse that says you must vote Republican? Some people think so, but I think that is actually things Christians say, the Bible says, that it doesn't actually say. With Pastor Paul, this is one of my favorite segments, is going through verses in the Bible and saying that verse in the Bible doesn't say what Christians say that it says. So let's talk about it. Psalm 139. It's a psalm written by David, and it is a verse that's used often when somebody says, "Oh, so you're for killing babies when you vote for President Joe Biden." And I say, where does it say that in the Bible? They'll point to a couple of verses, and one of them is Psalm 139. And so let's read a little bit of it, and I'll give you a context of why Christians say that and why I think the Bible doesn't say what they say that it says. Psalm 139, verse 1 says, "O Lord, you have searched me and know me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up, you discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in behind and before and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is too high. I cannot attain it. Where shall I go from your spirit? Where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol," another word for the Jewish vision of hell, "you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, and even there your hand shall lead me and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light with you. For you formed my inward parts, you knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in the secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them." Now, I'll let you go on and you can read the rest of the psalm at some point when you want. Many Christians say this verse is proof that God is anti-abortion, and if you vote Democrat for a pro-choice candidate, you're going to hell. And some of them will say, well, I don't really mean that, but I actually saw a video of a schmuck called Charlie Kirk that I think is a total a smart guy who is absolutely misusing the gifts given to him. But I saw him say the other day, like, God's not really a Republican, but if you vote Democrat, you're not a Christian. And he said it out loud. Many Christians are afraid to say it out loud. They just sort of really believe it when you get right down to it. But they use Psalm 139. And they use verse 13, "For you formed my inward parts, you knitted me together in my mother's womb." And they say, see, that's proof. God knew us in the womb. Therefore, life begins at conception, and abortion is murder. And so if you're pro-choice, you are a baby killer, and God wants us to let you know that you are. But let me tell you why the Bible doesn't actually say that. Let's go down to verse 15. "My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there were none of them." Verse 15 and 16 aren't talking about in the womb. They're talking about before creation. So let's get a couple of things straight here about Psalm 139. First off, Psalm 139 is poetry, and we have to be very careful about making theology out of poetic tomes in the Bible. The book of Job is a poetic storytelling form of the day. And if we make theology out of poetry, we can begin to believe that Satan gets to walk into God's throne room every day and say, God, is today the day I get to kill Paul Swearingen because I want to so badly? Is today the day I get to kill him? If we don't understand that that's allegorical poetry, we will build a theology that says, everything that bad happens to me is because Satan went in to try to kill me, and God is saying, no, you can't kill Paul, just maim him really bad and kill his children. And that's a bad theology. And again, we're building a theology out of Psalm 139 here, when in fact, it's poetry. In fact, if I take the whole verse and say that it's theology, not poetry, then what this is saying is I can try to hide myself at night and believe that God doesn't see me. That's not theology and true thought. That's poetic allegory. If I think my sins are going to be hidden from God, I need to know that even in the darkness of night, God can see me. No, nobody thinks, oh, it's nighttime, I'm going to be hidden and God's not going to see me. It's allegory. It's poetry. And you can't say, look, there's a whole book of poetry there. Now let's make a theology out of something here. And verse 15 is saying that God knew us in the womb. And verses 16 and 17 are saying, oh, by the way, God knew us before creation. And if verse 15 means abortion is murder and anybody who votes pro-choice is a baby killer, then verses 16 and 17 mean our Catholic friends are right, and contraceptive is also taking a life decision in your hands, and you're also guilty of murder. Evangelicals, if you're using verse 15 to make a theology against abortion, but you allow contraceptives to be used, then you're violating verses 16 and 17. You're hypocrites in your interpretation of the Bible. Now I know you're thinking about this and saying, what? If a poetic verse that says God knew us in the womb means abortion is murder because you're killing something that God is saying shall live, then why is it that if God knew us at the foundations of creation, that contraceptives aren't the same issue? Now, I'm not saying you should be against contraceptives if you're against abortion. I'm saying God has grace in all circumstances to understand our humanness and how we're living life. By the way, let me ask you a question, fundamentalist evangelical. If God has a book that has every day of our life written in it, even while we're being formed in the depths of the earth at creation, then wouldn't God know what people are going to be aborted? Is abortion the one time in the history of the universe where humanity can interrupt God's plan for people? Wouldn't God have known that it's coming and have adjusted his plan for that moment? Maybe the problem, staunch anti-abortionist, is we need a bigger God that has a bigger understanding and a bigger love for humanity than the God of republicanism that you've created. Little g God of republicanism you've created versus the big, big God that understands who we are as human beings. And his grace can supersede all of those things. It's a little bit hard to understand, isn't it? But if we believe God only knew us at conception in the womb, then we don't believe Ephesians 1:4 that says Christ chose us before the world was made or the foundation of the world was laid. When he says, you knew my unformed substance in the depths, he's talking about the creation when the earth was without form and then God created it into earth. It says God knew us then. And I believe that's because we're all eternal beings. And so we were all in relationship with God then, before the creation of this finite place of earth. God's really big. He doesn't just know us at conception in the womb. He knew us long before that. And so to boil God down to this human construct of political religion, I think is building an idol, and you're worshiping something that's not the true God. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying through all of this that I think God loves abortion. I don't think anybody loves abortion. And stop it. They just don't. It's just not true. But does God understand who we are? And say, I'm going to make it okay because I can make good out of everything? That's the big God that I want to chase and follow, not the little God that needs a really horrible Republican person as president to set things right again. That's the Pharisees and Sadducees looking at the sky and reading the tea leaves in this instead of pulling down something amazing from heaven that's bigger than our mindset and mentality. Evangelicals, you need me to be able to say you don't know the spirit you're of when you say things like, it's sin to vote for a Democrat. You've been in that political religious mindset so long, you read the Bible through your filter always, every day. How do I know? Because I used to read it through the same filter and believe the same things. Then when the scales were taken from my eyes and I was able to say, oh, God's bigger than the little God I've been taught. Good things were able to happen. So I'm going to do this every week and record a Bible talk so we can get deeper into discussions about what's going on in the Bible and what it means to us today. One other thing you can do is you can ask questions. You can go on to my TikTok page and there's a little question box at the bottom, or you can just send me an email through my website at pastor-paul.com. And at the end of every Bible talk, I'll answer a question or two and we'll get that Q&A going. Okay, I hope you'll join me tomorrow morning. We have what we call our Sunday gathering, came out of the nonpartisan evangelicals, just a group of people sharing life and sharing communion together. And I hope you'll join me for that. If you go to my TikTok page and click in my bio, there's a link that'll take you to a link tree and show you how to get the Zoom. Or you can go to my website, pastor-paul.com. Click on the contact events page and it has the link to get in the Zoom room, or we'll just do it on TikTok. All right, guys, I'm going to let you go now. I speak blessing and shalom over you and your oikos, which is your household of people around you. And I love you guys an awful lot. Have a great day. Take care. We'll see you next time with Pastor Paul.